Do you like it? He's so fixated on it. Our dogs love to chew on bones, so why not make some homemade bone broth? Dogs can have bone broth too, and all you need to do is just make a few adjustments to the classic recipe. I'm starting off with just some marrow bones that I found at the grocery store. You can do a combination of bones. You'll just want to roast them first. Now, usually if you roast them in the oven, you'll want to do it at about 400 for about an hour or so, but I like to take a little shortcut with the air fryer. So I go ahead and take my selection of bones in a single layer in my air fryer. Just go ahead and do it on 400 for about 15, maybe 20 minutes if you have larger bones, but that's all you need to crisp them up. Roasting your bones will help get rid of some of those impurities. It'll help render out some of the fat first. So you want to start off with a few roasted bones. It's usually good to use a variety of bones, knuckle bones. You can use pig trotters or chicken feet if you can find those at specialty markets in your area. But I just found some marrow bones, so we're just gonna do a small batch just with those. But bone broth is always better if you have a variety of bones in there. Now, just adding some aromatics like carrots. Just clean your vegetables really well, make sure there's no dirt on them, and I just kind of break them up. They can be really loose. They're just gonna stew and cook for a long time. Doesn't really matter how they're cut. Same with my celery, rough chopping some celery, throwing that in there. This is great for the scraps. Maybe you're making another recipe, you just have some leftover, maybe even wilty vegetables, just like at the end of their life. It's a perfect time to make bone broth. And then I'm just gonna do a little bit of parsley. Now, we've just omitted onion and garlic, no peppercorns or any other herbs or spices. I just like to keep it basic. So this is a bone broth you can eat as a human. It's people bone broth. It's also pet bone broth. So make sure to leave out those ingredients that pets can't have, like the onion and the garlic. This is just a simplified bone broth. I like to make a big volume. That's why I'm using a crock pot. Sometimes when I'm making bone broth for myself, I'll use an Instant Pot. That's kind of a shortcut, only takes, 2, maybe 4 hours, depending on your recipe. Just adding some water in here, just enough to cover everything. Those vegetables will give off a lot of liquid too, so those will cook down. There we go. And then no salt too, that's the other thing. Even when I'm making my own personal bone broth, I'll salt when I'm using it for a recipe or to drink, just individual portions. So no salt, no spices, and keep the ingredients pretty basic. Now, a little apple cider vinegar, I just do a couple glugs. Apple cider vinegar has a lot of health benefits in itself, and it also helps extract a lot of the minerals and vitamins from the bones themselves. So vinegar is gonna help get more out of the bones and create a healthier, richer bone broth. Bone broth is super easy to make. The thing that makes people hesitant to make it is the time. If you're doing it on the stove, you'll need to watch a pot slowly simmer for hours and hours, even up to a day. In an Instant Pot, it can go quick, but Instant Pots or pressure cookers have such small volume. Anytime I make my pressure cooker bone broth, it usually yields me just a couple quarts, so not very much for all the time, energy, and the price of the bones. But a crock pot, find some bones on sale, stock up with some bones, maybe from a chicken carcass, a turkey carcass, save those up in the freezer, and then roast those off, and you can make a lot of liquid gold in your crock pot, and it just sits for hours and hours and hours. Just set this, tuck it away in a corner, and just let it cook. This took very little time to assemble and get together. The prep is very easy, and now you just have to wait. So let this go at least 8 hours. So I like to do it in the evening, let it sit overnight, and go ahead and strain everything off the next morning. Or you can even start this in the morning and let this basically go for 24 hours to get a lot of extraction, especially if you're doing a large volume and a lot of bones. Just let this go. 8 to 10 hours, a good minimum. You can even go up to 24 hours for some recipes. So just let this go for a few hours, and then we'll have a little portion of people bone broth and a little portion of pup bone broth. The water that you add, you do wanna make sure you're using good quality filtered water. Sometimes I'll pick up just a jug of water at the grocery store that I'll use for my bone broth, or if you have good filtered water at home, you can go ahead and use that. Just try to avoid using straight tap water. You want all the benefits out of the bone broth, so using good water is one of those ingredients. They do make bone broth supplements and alternatives for pets, but those are even more expensive. So if you get the opportunity and you have time, go ahead and make some wholesome, delicious bone broth for you and your pets. Now this is well worth the wait. I've been letting this cook for quite a while. It's been about 8 to 10 hours that this has been sitting, so that's good enough for a base bone broth. I've seen recipes, people even let this go for up to 24 hours, so really getting a lot of extraction out of those bones, and by that point, they're so brittle, you can almost like break them apart. But 8 to 10 hours overnight, perfectly fine. I'm gonna start straining out all of our ingredients. You just wanna get all these solids out of there. And you'll notice that it's kind of glossy on top. That's all the fat that's rendered out from your bones. That we want to get rid of too, but we'll do that through cooling. You can pick out all that bone marrow. That's great for your pups too. Just make sure you don't get any solid bones on there. So if there's any of that marrow left, you can pick that out, and that's great for you and your dogs. If you want to eat it too, it's all edible. There's our bones. You can tell they're kind of turning white. All of the nutrients, all of the flavor inside those bones are now in our liquid. Separate the vegetables, you can compost them. You can even blend them up, supplement it inside the bone broth. It's good, healthy vegetables that you can even give to your dog if their diet allows that. I have a colander just with a bowl underneath, so any remaining liquid, all the liquid is gold, so you wanna capture as much as you can. A lot of times when I make bone broth, I'll let this sit for a while so everything will leach out, or I'll kind of press it down just to get as much as I can. This is why I like the crock pot method. You can make so much volume of bone broth. You could do this over a large pot, of course, but that is gonna take a lot of watching, and you don't really want a pot on the stove on for about 24 hours, up to 24 hours, 10 hours. So a crock pot's a much safer way for you to set it. Just let it do its thing. You don't have to worry about it. It's at a consistent temperature. It's not too high, not too low. And just let everything stew, and you can get a lot more liquid out of a crock pot. If I had more bones, I would have filled this thing up and did a huge, huge batch. Now, I do want to give that a quick strain. You can let this cool in the crock pot, but I like to do it right away while it is still pretty warm. You want to be very gentle. Strain everything. Perfect, perfect. Crock pot, you are amazing. Now we're just left with the liquid gold. I like to package this up in containers. You can do a large bowl, whatever works for you for portioning out your bone broth. This isn't all just pup bone broth. You can portion out some for you. There's no salt in here. The ingredients that are harmful to dogs are left out. But bone broth is so healthy for humans. It has a lot of great health benefits for your dogs. Now, you do want to introduce bone broth into your pet's diet kind of gradually. If you're a pet owner, you probably know that introducing them to new food, you want to do it slowly and gradually just to see how they respond to it. Of course, if your dog has any kind of dietary concerns, just make sure to check with your vet first. But a lot of resources recommend bone broth for your dogs. You can make it at home. It's a lot cheaper than buying store-bought. And when it comes to store-bought bone broth, it may include some of those ingredients that dogs can't have. So making your own, you can quality control everything. Make it healthy, make it safe. I have another little portion, but you get quite a bit. Let this cool down a little bit, and once it's cool to the touch, you can throw it in the refrigerator. A fat layer will solidify on top. You can discard that, and once it's cooled down, it should be pretty gelatinous and thick. That means your bone broth is ready to go, and you can put it in the freezer. It'll last for several months in the freezer. That's the best way to prep bone broth and store it for long term, is to just portion it out and freeze it. Most dogs I've known in my life love to snack on ice cubes. Ice cubes, of course, are just water. A bone broth cube will contain all the nutrients. This is just a fun treat to add to their food or give to your dog just as a treat on its own. This I mix with peanut butter. Just mix your bone broth with peanut butter, put it in a silicone mold or an ice cube tray, and you can go ahead and freeze that into bone broth cubes for your dog. You can do other mix-ins. Some dogs can eat yogurt, so you can do a yogurt mix-in. You can do mashed up banana. You can do unsweetened applesauce, that works as well. Choose a silicone mold or an ice cube tray that is the size appropriate for your dog. If you have a tiny pooch, then go ahead and use tiny ice cube trays. If you have a larger dog, they might be able to handle these mega cubes. These are real frozen in here. These are impossible. Cut to me actually being able to get these out of here. A mold or an ice cube tray is a great way to portion your bone broth too. Once they're frozen, you can remove them, put them in another container or bag, just pop them out, and you have your portion you need that you want to give to your pet when it's time for them to eat or as a little treat. Another alternative, if ice is a little too tough and hard for your dog, especially if they're older or have sensitivity in their teeth, you can make gummies out of your bone broth. Gelatin will be softer on the teeth for dogs who have issues chewing. Hi, the star of the show. Hi, buddy. Do you like it? He's so fixated on it. See, even though this cube's a little too big for him, you just give it a few licks, huh? Yummy. Peanut butter bone broth. We got a happy customer.